All right, so picture this with me. The Ural Mountains, 1959. Dead of winter. A group of hikers, pretty experienced. They head out, on a trek. Sounds like pretty normal, right? Except they vanish.
Yeah, and it's not just that they vanish
Right.
when they finally find the scene weeks later. It's not your typical missing persons case.
Definitely not.
Not at all. The Dyatlov Pass incident, it's like the blueprint for a mystery, Isolated location, weird clues, and then you've got these theories, some of them totally normal, some...
Well, out there.
Let's just say it's a story that sticks with you.
Okay, so let's get into it. January 1959, we've got 10 hikers. 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, he's leading. They're setting off on this winter trek, and it's supposed to be challenging. Now, these aren't like beginners or anything. They knew what they were doing. These are experienced outdoors people.
See, and that's the thing. That's what's so eerie about it. It wasn't just some folks who wandered into danger unprepared.
Right.
We're talking experienced hikers. They knew winter conditions. It adds this whole other level of like, what the heck happened?
I know, right? So the group, it's mostly students, all around 20 years old. And then there's a sports instructor with them. He's a little older, late 30s. And this is where it gets even more interesting. 5 days in, one of them, Yuri Yudin, he has to head back. Sciatica. It was flaring up.
Wow.
Talk about a close call he had no idea about, huh?
Makes you think, doesn't it? What if he hadn't turned back? Would he have met the same fate? It's like the big question, right?
It really is. And sadly, the other 9 hikers, they never came back. They're overdue. Search parties go out. It's February of 59. And what they find is, well, baffling is more like it.
That campsite, that's where this mystery really gets going. Imagine.
Yeah.
The tent is a total mess. Slashed open from the inside, like they panicked, cut their way out, belongings everywhere. But here's the thing. There's carefully prepared food, like they were about to eat.
Oh.
It's almost like something made them just ditch the tent. No time to think.
Yeah. But why leave everything else?
Exactly.
Doesn't make sense.
They left behind winter gear. Important stuff. Boots, coats, things you need in those conditions. It's almost like, I don't know, they didn't have time to grab it. Or they were so freaked out they didn't even think.
Yeah, like they were running for their lives.
And then there are the bodies.
Yeah.
Spread out, some of them.
Yeah.
Not fully dressed. And here's where it gets even weirder.
Mm-hmm.
Some had these horrible injuries, internal injuries, like crushed chests, fractured skulls, but no wounds on the outside to match. One of them, his tongue was missing. And get this, another one, they think he bit off part of his own knuckle.
Oh my gosh. That's awful. I mean, what could possibly do that?
It doesn't add up. Not like a normal accident or anything.
With all that strangeness, no wonder the rumors started swirling.
Right, yeah.
Secret weapons testing? Yetis? I mean, come on. Wouldn't you think the same thing? The human mind, it likes to fill in the blanks when it's faced with something it can't explain.
And the Soviets, their first investigation, didn't help much. They blamed it on some compelling natural force.
Which tells us absolutely nothing.
Exactly. A lot of people thought, okay, they're hiding something. Maybe something even worse. Theories started popping up. KGB, even the CIA, Cold War and all.
Makes sense, right? And then, to make it even juicier, there's the radiation part. They find traces of it on some of the hikers' clothing. Talk about fuel for a conspiracy theory fire.
Okay, yeah, the radiation thing is
weird.
Very weird.
But it might have a more, shall we say, normal explanation. Turns out, a couple years before all this happened, there was a nuclear accident. The Kishtim disaster. And one of the hikers, he'd lived in the area where that happened. Another one, he'd helped with the cleanup.
So maybe just a really, really bad coincidence. Still, though, it makes you wonder, what else did they miss? Or, not tell us?
It's what makes this whole thing so fascinating.
All right, the mystery. So then it's 2019, all these years later, and maybe because people are still hooked on this case, they reopen the investigation.
Well, I love it.
And this time, there's this new theory. A slab avalanche. Can you tell us about that? So you know how most people think of an avalanche, right?
Yeah.
Big, huge wave of snow.
Yeah.
This is different. A slab avalanche, it's like this whole layer of snow just breaks off and it whoosh, slides down.
Great.
And it can happen super fast, no warning. So the theory is maybe, just maybe, one of these slab avalanches, maybe even a small one, hit the hikers. Caught them totally off guard.
That would explain why they had to get out of that tent so fast.
Right. Maybe they didn't even process it as a threat at first. Just get out.
So are we saying the avalanche theory, that's the answer? It does kind of seem to fit, right? That whole running in a panic thing. But how does an avalanche explain those injuries? those weird injuries, I mean. Avalanches don't usually crush your ribs or make you bite off your own,
Knuckle. Yeah, that's one of the trickier parts of the avalanche theory. It explains why they ran, but those injuries, some of them, they're just so severe and strange.
Right.
Some researchers think maybe, okay, so they run out of the tent, right? And they try to find some kind of shelter, maybe something like a den, and it collapses.
Ah, so they get hit twice.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Could explain those more traumatic injuries, at least.
Okay, that makes a bit more sense. What about the missing body parts, though? Was that the shelter collapsing, too?
Could be. It's possible. But some experts think, no, it was animals, scavengers, after the fact.
Right.
But again, nobody knows for sure.
So the avalanche, it's possible, but there are still those loose ends, What about the terrain itself? Could a slab avalanche even happen there, where the tent was?
Good point. It's something that some experts just don't buy because of the terrain. It wasn't that steep.
So the avalanche thing, maybe not a perfect fit. Ugh, it's
Yeah.
like every time there's a possible answer,
Right.
it just leads to more questions. Though I guess that's what makes this whole thing so interesting. Okay, what about that, you said it before, paradoxical undressing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Could that be why some of them were, like, partly dressed?
Maybe. It's a thing. It really happens. With hypothermia, sometimes. Sounds crazy. But when it gets really bad, people, they feel hot, like burning up. So they start taking off their clothes.
You'd think in that weather they'd be like, nope, gotta stay bundled up.
You would think, right. But hypothermia, it messes with you. Your thinking, your judgment, everything. They might not have even realized what they were doing.
Okay, see, that's just scary. But even if hypothermia explains that part, why were they so scared in the first place? These were experienced hikers. They knew how to handle the cold. What would make them cut themselves out of a tent and run out into, like, freezing darkness?
$1 million question right
Yeah.
there. And people have come up with, so many ideas. Some researchers, they think maybe mass hysteria, like the whole group just panicked.
Mass hysteria. Like, what if they all just freaked out at the same time? What would even cause that out there?
Hard to say for sure. Could be anything, really. They see something or think they see something, a sound, anything unexpected. There's even the infrasound theory.
Infrasound. What's that?
So it's a sound, but it's so low we can't even hear it. But some people, it can really mess with them, make them uneasy, anxious, even trigger a panic attack.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and there are these theories that, like, certain weather, the ground, even animals can make this infrasound.
So they might have been, like, running from a sound they couldn't even hear. Okay, now that is spooky. Is there, like, any proof of that? The infrasound, I mean?
Honestly, for this case, not really. It's come up in other cases where people got scared or disoriented for no apparent reason. But for Dyatlov Pass, it's mostly speculation.
Okay, I guess we have to talk about it. The
The Yeti in the room.
exactly. We can't do a whole deep dive on Dyatlov Pass and not at least mention the Yeti, right?
Of course not. The Ural Mountains, they're isolated,
No.
kind of spooky, perfect for stories about weird creatures, right? And the Mansi people, they're an indigenous group who live there. They have these legends about creatures called Menkfs,
Mankvifs. Okay, what are they exactly?
basically like Bigfoot. Or the Yetis, yeah.
Yeah.
Big ape-like creatures live up in the snowy mountains where nobody goes. Of course, there's no real proof they exist. But the stories, they stick around,
Especially with a case like this, right? Makes it easy to connect those dots.
For sure.
But even if we, like, put the Yeti aside for now, and it's fun to think about, we've still got all these unanswered questions. What about other ideas? I know we've covered a lot, but is there anything else that might explain it?
Oh, tons of theories out there. Some people think it was like a military experiment gone wrong. They point to reports of strange lights in the sky around that time. Some go even further, say it was UFOs. And then there's the classic government cover-up theory.
Right, military, UFOs, cover-ups, now we're getting into X-Files territory. It really is amazing, though, how this one event just keeps inspiring these wild theories all these years later.
I know, right? But it just shows you how much power a good mystery has. People, we want to know the unknown. We want explanations, especially for things that don't make sense.
It's kind of nice to know that even with all our technology and stuff, there are still mysteries, things we can't figure out. But does that mean we just got to give up? Stop trying to solve them?
Not at all. If anything, it should make us even more curious. Keep asking questions, keep looking for answers. Even if we never find the one true answer, just trying to figure it out, that's how we learn new things,
I like that. It's about the journey. So we've talked a lot about, like, outside stuff that could happen, but what about the hikers themselves? They had their own thing going on, right? Relationships, arguments, who knows? Could something within the group have caused all this?
It's definitely a possibility. Some researchers think there might have been tension in the group, little arguments, disagreements, and when you're stuck out there, in those conditions, things can escalate quickly.
Especially with that whole mass hysteria thing we were talking about. If they were already kind of on edge, maybe that made it easier for them to just, like, lose it.
Exactly. Plus, let's be real, we're working with official reports, right?
Yeah.
From the Soviet Union in the 50s. Who knows what they left out?
So we'll never really know the full story. Were there fights we don't know about? Secrets? These were young people, they took risks, maybe they got in over their heads. Did something happen that they were trying to hide?
It's possible. We can look at the evidence all day, come up with theories, but in the end, we only know so much.
We weren't there. It's like they say, we see the world not as it is, but as we are. Our own experiences, they color how we see things. This whole case, it's like we need to get inside their heads, understand their fears, and we just can't. Not really.
And that's what makes the Dyatlov Pass incident so fascinating and so frustrating. We might never have a real answer.
So after all this, is there a theory you find most convincing?
Honestly. It changes all the time. If I had to pick one, I'd say it was a perfect storm, maybe a small avalanche, one they didn't even realize was dangerous at first. They panic, run out of the tent, now they're freezing, hypothermia sets in, they can't think straight. It's tragic, but it can happen, even to experienced people.
Nature can be so unforgiving.
It's true. But I think it's important to remember we might never know the whole truth, and that's okay. It's part of what keeps us coming back to these mysteries.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the Dyatlov Pass, what do you want our listeners to take away from this? Why are we still talking about something that happened back in 1959?
Because it's a story that stays with you. It reminds us of how powerful nature is, how fragile we are, and how much we still don't understand. But more than anything, it reminds us that some mysteries, we may never solve them. And sometimes the searching is just as important as the finding.
Wow, I like that. So to everyone listening, keep the Dyatlov Pass in mind as you go about your day. Let it remind you to question what you think you know and never lose that sense of wonder. What do you think happened that night? Let us know.